They thought he was just another stray, discarded, broken, forgotten. But what no one knew was that this dog once wore a badge, once stood between darkness and the innocent. Betrayed by those he served, left to bleed into the dirt, he should have faded into the silence. But fate had other plans. Because sometimes angels don't have wings, they have scars and 4 legs. This is the story of Shadow, the silent guardian who was thrown away, but never stopped believing in the people who gave up on him. The town of Aspen Creek, nestled between the pine-covered slopes of the Colorado Rockies, had always been known for its quiet winters and postcard-perfect springs. But that day, spring arrived not with blooming wildflowers, but with a storm. Gray clouds curled low over the rooftops, spilling cold rain onto the soaked earth. Wind whipped through the narrow streets, rattling shutters and sending branches clattering to the ground. It was the kind of weather that urged most people indoors, but not Lisa Hartman. Lisa, 38, was a tall woman with long auburn hair usually tied in a messy ponytail and eyes the color of worn denim, soft yet perceptive. She had a lean frame hardened by years of single motherhood and a career as a social worker in one of the state's most overlooked counties. Life had taught her resilience through loss. Her husband Drew had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Since then, Lisa had built a fortress around her heart, made of paperwork, late-night coffee, and the love for her only son, Ethan. But even behind her calm voice and sturdy posture, there was still an ache, a quiet longing for purpose beyond survival. That day, Lisa was returning from a house visit in the outskirts when she decided to take a detour. The road ahead was flooded and her Jeep Wrangler had skidded on the mud twice, so she pulled over near an old trail she remembered from childhood hikes. With her raincoat pulled tight and boots sinking into the mud, she made her way past a row of evergreens toward an abandoned hunting cabin she hadn't seen in years. She didn't expect to hear it, at first a low, broken whimper that barely rose above the patter of rain. It wasn't the cry of a coyote or any animal wild to the forest. It was deliberate, pleading, human almost. Lisa paused, rain dripping from the edge of her hood, scanning the landscape. Then she saw it. Behind the sagging frame of the old cabin, barely shielded from the storm by a rusted tin overhang, was a large German shepherd. The dog was lying in the mud ribs, showing stark under a matted black and tan coat. A chain of rusted steel bit into his neck, bolted to a bent iron stake. His ears twitched at her approach, but he didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just looked at her with eyes wide, wet, and glassy, full of pain and something else. Hope. Lisa's breath caught. "Oh my God!" she whispered, heart suddenly pounding. She approached, slowly crouching just beyond reach. "Hey there, buddy. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She saw the chain had tangled, shortening his reach. Flies buzzed near a patch of dried blood on his shoulder. The dog's face was long and noble beneath the filth. His right ear stood tall, while the left flopped slightly, a trait she remembered from K9 training dogs. He must have been 3, maybe 4 years old. Once powerful, now skeletal, his limbs trembled when he tried to rise. But his eyes never left hers. They begged for something more than just food or shelter. They begged for mercy. At that moment, the world around Lisa dimmed. The cold no longer mattered. The rain on her cheeks blurred with tears. She took off her coat and slowly laid it over the dog. "You're going to be okay," she murmured. "I've got you." From behind her, a voice broke the silence. "Mom?" It was Ethan. Ethan Hartman. 12 had changed in the last 3 years since his father's death. Once a boy who climbed trees and built forts, he had grown quiet, withdrawn. He was pale, his lanky frame too thin for his age, and his dark blonde hair always hung just a bit too long over his eyes. Lisa hadn't realized he'd followed her. But there he stood, his hands in the sleeves of his oversized hoodie, sneakers soaked through. His eyes were fixed on the dog. Lisa blinked in surprise. "Ethan, I thought you were in the car. I saw you walking into the woods. I didn't want you to be alone." Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat and turned back to the dog. "Help me find something to get this chain off." Together, mother and son worked in the cold rain. Lisa retrieved a crowbar from her Jeep's emergency kit, while Ethan found an old piece of firewood to use as leverage. As they pried the rusted stake from the mud, the dog let out a soft grunt of pain. Ethan kneeled down, placing a trembling hand on the animal's side. "He's hurt," Ethan said, voice barely a whisper. "But he's not scared of me. No, Lisa agreed, looking into the dog's eyes. He's just waiting for someone to care. With one final yank, the chain gave way. The dog flinched but didn't resist. Lisa wrapped her raincoat around him, and Ethan ran ahead to open the Jeep door. They lifted the dog into the back seat, laying him gently over an old quilt. "What should we call him?" Ethan asked, his voice softer than it had been in months. Lisa looked in the rearview mirror as she started the engine. The dog's head rested on the blanket, his eyes already closing from exhaustion. "Shadow," she said. "He looks like he's been hiding for a long time." "Shadow," Ethan repeated, and the corners of his lips curled into the ghost of a smile. They drove back toward town, in silence, the rain easing into a light drizzle. In the back seat, Shadow didn't make a sound, but his breathing grew steadier. For Lisa, that moment marked a turning point, an echo of something long buried beneath grief. For Ethan, it was the first time in months that he had felt something like connection. And for Shadow, it was the first time in perhaps years that someone had truly seen him, not as a tool, not as a burden, but as a soul worth saving. As the town of Aspen Creek reappeared through the windshield, lit by scattered porch lights and the last colors of a stormy dusk, none of them knew how much their lives were about to change. But change had already begun in the rain, in the silence and the quiet cry that had been heard at last. The following morning, Aspen Creek awakened beneath a veil of mist and soft bird song. The spring storm had passed, leaving the town glistening with dew. Lisa Hartman stood in her kitchen fingers, wrapped around a warm mug of coffee, her eyes on the gravel driveway outside. Sleep had evaded her each time she closed her eyes. She saw the image of that German shepherd, broken and trembling in the mud. In the laundry room, Shadow still lay curled on an old comforter, breathing slow but steady. He had eaten a little during the night, but his strength remained paper-thin. Lisa had called the local veterinary clinic as soon as they opened and scheduled the earliest possible appointment. Her 12-year-old son, Ethan, padded into the room, his long sleeves pushed over thin wrists, dark blonde hair sticking up from sleep. "Is he still alive?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the morning cold. Lisa nodded. "He's hanging on. We're going to the vet in half an hour. Want to come?" There was a pause, one of those silent gaps Lisa had grown used to, but then Ethan nodded. "Yeah." The Aspen Creek Animal Clinic was nestled at the edge of downtown beside a coffee shop and across from the old post office. The building was small with red shutters and a wide wooden porch shaded by a sprawling oak tree. Inside it smelled faintly of antiseptic and pine wood, and the walls were lined with photographs of adopted pets. Behind the front desk stood Dr. Dylan Morris, a man in his early 40s with an upright posture and gentle movements. He had ash blonde hair cropped close and wore a forest green fleece over navy scrubs. His gray eyes, calm and precise, hinted at a military past, one filled with structured discipline and things left unspoken. A former Army veterinarian, Dylan had served with K-9 units abroad and now ran the clinic with steady compassion and quiet efficiency. "You must be the Hartmans," he said, greeting them at the door. "And this is the dog you found," Lisa nodded. "We think his name is Shadow." Dylan followed them to the car. Shadow, too weak to stand, was curled on a blanket in the back seat. Dylan crouched beside him and examined the dog's dull coat and visible ribs. "Let's get him inside." Inside the examination room, Shadow was placed gently on a padded table. He didn't resist, but let out a low whimper as Dylan pressed lightly on his side. Ethan stood quietly in the corner, his eyes never leaving the dog. "Tell me everything," Dylan said as he moved through his routine checks. Lisa explained the night before the cabin, the chain, the storm. "He's been through hell," she finished softly. Dylan nodded, brushing aside the matted fur around Shadow's neck. "Wait a second," he muttered. Around the dog's collar, caked in mud and debris, was a scratched rectangular tag with a small black chip. "This isn't a standard tag," Dylan said, cleaning it with a cloth. "It's a smart collar, military grade with an embedded chip." He tapped the chip with his portable scanner. A beep sounded and data flickered on the screen of his tablet. Dylan's brows knitted as he scrolled. He was registered under a K-9 unit based out of El Paso, Texas. Lisa's heart jumped. "So? Military." "Most likely," Dylan replied. His registered name was Sergeant, 3 years old. Assigned to an officer named Roy Calhoun. But the registry hasn't been updated in over 6 months. No sign of decommission. It's like he just disappeared. Ethan stepped forward, slowly peering at the screen. He was trained to protect people. Dylan glanced at him. Yes, and judging by the muscle memory in his legs and the way he responds to pressure, he was good at it. He pressed gently on the abdomen again. Shadow tensed, letting out another pained sound. "There's trauma here," Dylan murmured. "Could be an old wound. Maybe shrapnel or blunt force. Someone stitched him up, but they didn't do it properly. And then they dumped him like broken equipment." Lisa's stomach turned. "How can people do that?" Dylan didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than words. While Dylan prepared an IV drip and a mild sedative to ease Shadow's pain, Ethan hovered nearby. At one point, Dylan handed the boy a stethoscope. "Want to help?" Ethan blinked. "Me," Dylan nodded. "Just place it here." Gently. With guidance, Ethan placed the stethoscope on Shadow's side and listened. His eyes widened. "I can hear it. It's strong." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. That sound, the simple thump of life, suddenly meant everything. After administering fluids and starting a basic pain management plan, Dylan handed Lisa a small kit of medications and a printed report. "He's going to need care and patience. Lots of it. We'll give him both," Lisa promised. As they stepped outside into the midday light, the sun now high above the mountains, Ethan carried Shadow's medication kit, while Lisa helped the dog back into the car. Shadow leaned gently against her, as if he knew she was the one who saved him. That evening, Lisa sat at the dining table drafting an email to the Aspen Creek Sheriff's Office. She included the location of the cabin and a photo of the smart tag. Her fingers hovered over the send button. She hesitated, unsure if she was prying into a past better left buried, but then pressed it. Outside, Ethan sat beside Shadow in the backyard, a blanket draped over both of them. He was reading aloud from a book he found at the school library, The History of Hero Dogs. His voice was soft, full of newness. Shadow rested his chin on Ethan's knee. His tail thumped just once and stayed still. The nights in Aspen Creek were beginning to soften with the approach of true spring, but Lisa Hartman had found little comfort in the gentle breeze that now drifted through her bedroom window. Nearly every night for the past week, she had been startled awake by the same chilling sound, Shadow's cries. They weren't loud at first, but grew into frenzied, heart-wrenching barks echoing through the darkened hallways of the house. Sometimes he scratched at the walls in his sleep. Other times he curled into a trembling ball at the foot of Ethan's bed. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Lisa sat beside Shadow until dawn, her fingers gently stroking his ear as his breath slowed. His dreams were not of open fields or chasing balls, but of sirens, gunfire, and betrayal. It was clear now his scars ran far deeper than the ones beneath his fur. The next morning, determined to uncover the truth, Lisa returned to the Aspen Creek Animal Clinic with Shadow and a folder full of printed screenshots from the CHIP registry. She hoped Dr. Dylan Morris might help her trace Shadow's past more thoroughly. Dylan, who had always carried himself with a calm reserve, looked more serious than usual as he examined the documents. "You said the CHIP registry showed he was registered to Roy Calhoun." Lisa nodded, but no record of discharge, no update. It's like someone just wiped him out of existence. Dylan leaned back in his office chair, arms crossed. "I've heard whispers about units like that. Dogs that go off the grid. Sometimes it's paperwork error. Sometimes it's deliberate." He stood and crossed to a cabinet, pulling down an old laptop. "I have a few contacts in Texas. If he was involved in something high stakes, there might be unofficial logs." Lisa watched him, anxiety coiling in her gut. "Do you think he saw something?" Awful. Dylan's expression darkened. "If the nightmares are that vivid, I'd say it wasn't just trauma, it was memory. He remembers what happened to him." While Dylan searched, Ethan had started spending his afternoons at the town library. He'd grown fascinated with German shepherds, learning about their loyalty, their intelligence, how they were used in rescue missions and warfare. He pored over dog training manuals and stories of canine heroes. One book in particular, Silent Guardians, followed the career of a narcotics canine named Blitz, whose loyalty had exposed a smuggling ring at the Mexican border. Ethan read every page like it was scripture. It was in that quiet space among dusty shelves and sunlit reading nooks that Ethan met Rachel Hale, a 10-year-old girl with strawberry curls, round glasses, and an encyclopedic knowledge of animal welfare laws. Rachel was the librarian's granddaughter and spent every school break volunteering behind the desk. Unlike Ethan, she spoke quickly and often her voice dancing through sentences without pause. She had a habit of quoting facts mid-conversation and had a peculiar fondness for chewing peppermint sticks even in spring. "You like police dogs?" she asked one afternoon, noticing the stack of books beside Ethan. Ethan, unused to peer interaction, simply nodded. "My uncle's a deputy," Rachel added matter of fact. "He says people dump canine dogs when they're injured. Says they're trained to obey, not to be loved." Ethan frowned. "That's not right." She smiled. "No, it's not." Meanwhile, back at the clinic, Dylan finally reached a contact in El Paso, a retired officer named Marcus Rudd, mid-60s ex-border agent, with a deep southern drawl and a voice like cracked gravel. Through a patchy video call, Marcus confirmed Shadow's identity. "Yeah, that's Sergeant all right. Damn good dog. Saved 2 officers during a sting operation last year. Took a bullet in the flank and still brought down a runner." Lisa's chest tightened. "Why was he abandoned?" Marcus sighed. "That's where it gets ugly. After he recovered, they wanted to retire him. But the paperwork got lost when Calhoun, his handler, was dismissed. Rumors said Calhoun was involved with a cartel sting that went sideways, might have been compromised. One day, both he and Sergeant vanished. We assumed they were relocated for protection, but now, I'm guessing Calhoun dumped the dog." Lisa stared at the screen. "So he was used and discarded," Worse Marcus said grimly. "He might have been a witness." That same week, the police department in Aspen Creek received an anonymous tip. Dogs, mostly ex-K9s, were being sold in underground rings throughout the Midwest. Sheriff Owen Blake, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a salt-and-pepper beard and thoughtful blue eyes, took immediate interest. Known for his calm demeanor and firm sense of justice, Owen had served in the military before returning to Aspen Creek to raise his daughter after his wife's passing. Years of field work had made him wary of cruelty, especially when directed at those who couldn't defend themselves. He reached out to Lisa after reviewing her report. They met at the station where Owen listened intently as Lisa recounted everything from the cabin in the woods to Shadow's scars. His eyes sharpened at the mention of the smart collar. "I've seen that model before," he murmured. "Black market imports, usually used by handlers who want a dog with skills but don't want the red tape." "You think someone bought him?" Lisa asked. "Or stole him? Either way, it lines up with what we're seeing: statewide dogs trained for protection, repurposed for illegal work." Owen pulled out a case folder filled with photos, some of injured dogs, others of recovered gear from raids. The resemblance to Shadow was haunting. "I'd like to take this further," Owen said. "Look into whoever owned that cabin. If he was dumped there, someone knew it was remote enough no one would find him." As Lisa left the station, her mind reeled. The truth was darker than she had expected, but also clearer. Shadow wasn't just a victim of neglect. He was a discarded soldier from a war fought in shadows and silence. Someone had tried to erase him, but they had failed. That night, as rain returned gently to the rooftops of Aspen Creek, Shadow lay beside Ethan in bed, his breath steady, no cries this time. In his sleep, his body twitched only slightly, no longer in panic, but as if chasing something in a dream. Ethan held a book against his chest, one hand resting on Shadow's back, and for the first time in weeks, both boy and dog slept soundly. The stars above Aspen Creek shone cold and clear, a rare sight after a week of persistent drizzle. The town, nestled between the dusky folds of pine-covered hills, had settled into its familiar stillness. But for Lisa, Hartman's sleep had once again become elusive. She lay in bed, eyes open, listening, not for sounds in the house, but for the silence. Shadow had stopped crying in his sleep for the past 2 nights, and that absence, though welcome, felt unnerving. In the next room, Ethan slept soundly, his arm draped over Shadow's back. The German Shepherd had grown stronger. His coat, once dull and coarse, was regaining its thickness. He moved with more purpose, responding to commands with a soldier's focus and a survivor's wariness. Still, something in his behavior remained sharp on edge. He watched windows too long. He tilted his head at distant noises, always alert. That night, a sound outside stirred him: quick-clipped footsteps and the subtle splash of water. Shadow's ears perked. A second later, he nudged Ethan awake with his muzzle. Shadow Ethan blinked sleepily, confused as the dog whined low and urgent. Then Shadow trotted to the door, glancing back at him. A beat passed. Ethan pulled on his coat. Lisa heard the front door creak and ran down the stairs just in time to see her son slipping into his boots. "Ethan, "I don't know, Mom. He's acting weird. Like something's out there," Ethan replied, grabbing a flashlight. Shadow barked once sharply and darted toward the woods behind their house. Lisa hesitated, then followed. The three of them moved through the underbrush, lit only by Ethan's flashlight and a half moon high above. The air smelled of wet moss and river mist. They were about to cross the small footbridge near Millstone Creek when Shadow stopped cold. A child's scream rang out brief and broken. Ethan froze. Without warning, Shadow lunged forward, racing toward the water. The beam of light from the flashlight shook as Lisa and Ethan gave chase. At the edge of the creek, they saw her, a small girl clinging to a tree root near the bank, one shoe missing her white pajama pants, soaked and covered in mud. She couldn't have been older than 7. Shadow bounded into the shallow water, his strong limbs slicing through the current. He reached the girl, gently clamping his jaws around the back of her sweatshirt and pulling her upward until Lisa could reach her. The girl sobbed as Lisa wrapped her coat around her. "My name's Mia," she whispered between hiccuping gasps. "I was sleepwalking. I woke up and didn't know where I was." Ethan pulled off his own jacket and wrapped it around her legs. They carried her back toward the house as the dog walked beside them, ever watchful. By the time they got Mia warm and dry, her parents had been alerted. The girl had slipped out through an unlocked door during the night and wandered for nearly a mile. The next morning, the story of Shadow's heroism spread quickly. By noon, Sheriff Owen Blake stood on Lisa's porch tipping his hat. "She's okay," he said. "Mia's shaken but safe. You saved her life. Or, rather, your dog did." Lisa smiled tiredly. He knew. Somehow he just knew. Owen crouched to pet Shadow, who allowed the contact, but remained alert, his eyes on the tree line. "I came to tell you something else," Owen said, standing. "We traced one of the smart collars recovered during the raid," he said, voice low. "It links to a shipment registered under a fake logistics company. Turns out that company's owned by Frank Delaney." Lisa's brow furrowed. But Shadow's chip was from the El Paso K-9 unit. He was assigned to Officer Calhoun. "What does that have to do with Delaney?" "That's the troubling part," Owen replied. "After Calhoun was dismissed, Shadow disappeared off the registry. No discharge, no transfer, just vanished. Someone scooped him up after that, and our best guess, Delaney's crew got their hands on him, probably through an underground handler. They've been trafficking trained dogs for years, using them for protection, transport, and even delivery." Lisa's face paled. So Shadow wasn't just discarded. He was stolen. And repurposed, Owen said grimly. Weaponized by people who saw his training as a tool, not a soul. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan had taken Mia, a small stuffed puppy, and a note thanking her for being brave. Mia's parents, Rebecca and Drew Wilson, were in their late 30s, kind-faced and visibly grateful. Rebecca had wavy brown hair and soft features marked with sleepless worry. Drew, a lean man with square shoulders and a deep voice, thanked Ethan in a way that left the boy stunned. No one noticed she was gone. "But your dog did. Thank you." Ethan simply nodded. That night he wrote a short essay for class titled, "The Dog Who Sees in the Dark." While Owen launched a deeper investigation into Delaney's operation, he asked Lisa for one more favor. "I want Shadow evaluated by our canine behaviorist," he said. "To see how deep the training went, he might still have skills we can use." That behaviorist turned out to be Marla Green, a woman in her late 50s with silver blonde hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp penetrating eyes. She wore cargo pants, old boots, and walked with the posture of someone who used to command attention in crowded military tents. Marla had a no-nonsense tone, but beneath it lay a quiet reverence for the dogs she worked with. Shadow responded to her like a soldier to a former commander. Within minutes, he sat laid down, tracked, and stopped on command. But when she tried the word search, he froze, ears back, chest heaving. Marla knelt down beside him. "He remembers too much," she murmured. "But he still trusts?" Lisa stood beside Owen as they watched the test unfold. "What now?" she asked. "We find Delaney," Owen said, "and make sure no more dogs are broken like this." That night, Shadow rested peacefully again. And this time, Lisa didn't sit up worrying. She sat beside him, stroking his head, whispering softly, "You found her. You brought her home." The light in Shadow's eyes flickered with something new, not just memory, but purpose. He had saved a life. He had not been erased. The tension in Aspen Creek had shifted from silent vigilance to sharp anticipation. For days, Sheriff Owen Blake and his team had been tracking Frank Delaney's movements, based on new surveillance footage and tips from neighboring counties. The man was elusive, a ghost with ties to cartel remnants and ex-military smugglers. But now, finally they had a location, an abandoned grain warehouse just outside Glen Hollow, 40 miles east of Aspen Creek. It was isolated with a single gravel road leading in, and nothing but trees on all sides. Owen called a special meeting at the precinct. Lisa Hartman stood in the back, arms crossed tightly, a knot in her chest. She hadn't meant to be there as more than a concerned citizen, but by now her bond with Shadow and the information they'd uncovered made her an indispensable part of the case. Owen stood at the center of the room, tall and grounded, in a dark tactical vest, maps spread before him. "We hit them tonight," he said, voice low and controlled, no sirens, no lights. "We go in quiet. We've confirmed they're moving dogs and weapons again, and this time, Shadow may be our edge." Shadow lay beside Lisa's feet, already sensing the storm building around him. Though still healing, his muscles had begun to return. His coat was cleaner now, richer in color, and his gait had regained its command. But there was a new look in his amber eyes, one of focus, not fear. Owen approached and crouched beside him. "You ready?" Soldier Shadow stood at attention. To prepare, Owen brought in Deputy Carla Vega, a sharp-witted woman in her early 30s with short black curls, keen hazel eyes, and the natural presence of a born leader. Carla had joined the department 5 years earlier after serving in the National Guard. Her background in reconnaissance and working with military dogs made her the best partner Shadow could ask for. "We'll handle perimeter entry," Carla said, clipping a camera onto her vest. "Shadow leads point. If there are dogs inside, he'll sniff them out first." Lisa felt a weight in her chest. "He's not fully healed. He won't go in first," Owen reassured. "But he'll be there. These dogs know when to act." As night fell over Glen Hollow, the team assembled just beyond the tree line. The warehouse stood silent under a half-lit moon, windows boarded, rust covering its metal frame. Through binoculars, Owen spotted faint movement shadows shifting near the side entrance. Armed men, 2 vehicles, a cage trailer behind the building. At 2:17 a.m., the raid began. Silently, deputies moved into formation. Carla and Shadow advanced through the underbrush. As they neared the rear wall, Shadow stopped, ears perked. He pawed the dirt, then veered left, sniffing the ground. Carla followed until he stopped at a patch of rotting wooden planks, beneath it a cellar door. She tapped her mic. "We have a secondary entrance." Shadow indicates movement below. Owen signaled to breach. The moment the team burst through the main door, chaos erupted. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Shouts rang out. Inside, they found more than crates of weapons. They found cages. 6 dogs, all different breeds, their coats' filthy ribs showing. Some barked weakly, others cowered. But the threat wasn't over. A man burst from behind a stack of boxes, tall, gaunt face twisted with anger. It was Frank Delaney. He held a short-barreled shotgun and fired blindly toward the shadows. Owen ducked behind a crate, calling out, "Frank, drop your weapon." Instead, Delaney ran toward the rear. That's when Shadow broke free of his leash. With precision, he tore after the fleeing man, bounding through debris and crates. Carla shouted, but it was too late. Shadow had already committed. In the blur of movement, Delaney aimed at Owen. Lisa and Ethan, who had arrived moments after the main breach in a nearby support vehicle, heard the gunfire as they ran toward the scene. Lisa's heart stopped as she saw the muzzle flash aimed toward Owen and Shadow, leaping through the air, intercepting the shot. A scream tore from Ethan's throat. The impact knocked Shadow to the ground, a cry escaping him. But even wounded, he crawled toward Delaney and latched onto the man's arm with a force born of training and fury. Delaney shrieked and dropped the gun, falling hard before being swarmed by deputies. Carla reached Shadow in seconds. Blood stained his side, but his eyes remained locked on Owen, who knelt beside him. "You saved my life," Owen whispered. Lisa arrived breathless and fell to her knees. "Shadow, no, stay with us." Ethan knelt beside her, hands trembling. "Please don't go," he whispered. Deputies rushed the dog to the waiting ambulance, where Dylan Morris, who had insisted on being nearby, immediately began working on stabilizing him. His face, pale jaw set, Dylan didn't say a word. He just worked. The next 12 hours blurred into a storm of paperwork, arrests, and emergency surgery. Frank Delaney and 4 of his men were taken into custody. The 6 dogs were rushed to shelters and veterinary care. Crates of unregistered firearms and black market equipment were logged as federal evidence. and Shadow made it through. Dylan emerged from the clinic's recovery room with smudges under his eyes and surgical gloves still hanging from one hand. He lost a lot of blood, he said, but he's alive. He's going to be okay. Lisa sank into the nearest chair. Ethan leaned against her shoulder, silent but smiling. Owen walked in moments later and dropped a small silver badge onto the table. For services rendered in the line of duty, he said with a grin. He's now an honorary deputy of Aspen Creek. Later that night, as rain pattered gently on the windows, Lisa sat at Shadow's side. The dog lay on a padded bed, bandages wrapped around his torso. I fall in place. Ethan sat nearby, reading softly from Silent Guardians, his voice steady. Shadow's tail gave a slow wag. You did it, Lisa whispered. You found them. You brought them down. And in that quiet moment, it wasn't just about justice. It was about trust, about healing, about choosing to fight for something better. Shadow wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol of everything they believed in. The days that followed the night raid passed in a quiet, reverent hush across Aspen Creek. Though the warehouse had been shut down, arrests made, and weapons secured, it was a different kind of battle being fought, now one for life, breath by breath, in a small recovery room at the Aspen Creek Animal Clinic. Shadow lay sedated, hooked to tubes and monitors, his bandaged body rising and falling with shallow determination. Lisa Hartman barely left his side. She sat through dawns and dusks beside the padded mat, where he rested, her auburn hair now often tied into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. She read books aloud when the room fell too silent. She whispered words of encouragement that no one else heard. And each time Shadow's ear twitched, each time his tail gave the faintest wag, hope stirred in her chest again. The entire town seemed to hold its breath with her. Outside the clinic, residents began leaving flowers, dog treats, and handwritten notes taped to the door. Get well, hero! Thank you, Shadow. You saved our own. Churches held prayer vigils. The mayor's office organized a candlelight walk through downtown. Even the local diner offered free coffee for anyone stopping by to write a card for Deputy Shadow. In the midst of this outpouring, Ethan changed. The boy who had once shied away from eye contact, who had lived in silence and the shadow of his grief, now found himself pulled toward the light. It was Principal Margaret Reyes, a tall, sharp-featured woman in her early 50s, known for her practical shoes and meticulous standards, who first reached out. She approached Lisa at the clinic one morning while delivering a bouquet of yellow tulips from Ethan's homeroom. Mrs. Hartman, she said, adjusting her silver-framed glasses, your son has something he wants to share. We're hosting a small school assembly to honor Shadow's bravery. Ethan asked if he could speak. Lisa blinked. He wants to talk in front of people? Margaret's expression softened. I think he has something important to say. The auditorium was modest, its old wooden stage polished and lit by warm yellow bulbs. On the day of the assembly, rows of students' parents and townsfolk filled the seats, murmuring softly. At center stage stood a large photo of Shadow, flanked by the town's flag and a handmade banner that read, Aspen Creek, thanks you. Ethan stood nervously behind the podium, his dark blonde hair tucked neatly under a cap, his hands gripping the sides of the lectern. He looked out into the crowd, and for a brief moment the panic returned. But then he saw Lisa, and beside her, Sheriff Owen Blake, standing straight in his dress uniform, hands clasped respectfully in front of him. Ethan took a breath. Hi. My name's Ethan, he began, voice quiet but clear, and I want to tell you about my best friend, Shadow. He paused. Before Shadow came to live with us, I was scared all the time. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't go outside much. After my dad died, everything just felt dark. Like, even when the sun was out, I couldn't feel it. The room stilled. But then Shadow came. He was hurt too. He didn't bark or eat or play at first. But he stayed close. He watched me, and one night when I couldn't sleep, he came and lay down beside me. That was the first time in a long time I didn't feel alone. Ethan's voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on. People think Shadow saved Mia that night, and he did. But before that, he saved me. And I hope he knows, we're going to save him too. A hush fell over the room. Then the first applause rang out, followed by a wave of standing ovation. Lisa stood frozen, hand over her mouth, heart swelling with both pride and awe. Later that afternoon, Lisa stepped outside the clinic for the first time in hours and found Owen waiting for her near the rose bushes. He had changed into a casual shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, his normally controlled expression soft. "She's quite the kid," he said. Lisa laughed under her breath. He's always had it in him. Just needed someone to remind him. They walked a few steps together in silence. "I've seen a lot in this job," Owen said, "and I've met some strong women. But I've never met anyone who carried the weight of two hearts like you do Ethan's and Shadow's." Lisa looked up at him. "I didn't do it alone." They stopped walking, their hands brushed. It wasn't a declaration or a confession, just a simple recognition of something growing slowly between them, trust, quiet companionship, a shared grief that was beginning to soften around the edges. Back in the clinic, Shadow stirred. Dylan Morris, still in his scrubs, checked the monitors with cautious optimism. "His vitals are stabilizing," he told Lisa when she returned. "The swelling's going down. If this continues, we'll try feeding him by mouth tomorrow." That evening, Lisa and Ethan sat together beside Shadow, reading from the same book Ethan had once held alone. Owen joined them quietly sipping coffee and occasionally reaching down to scratch behind Shadow's ears. The clinic room glowed with soft amber light. Outside, the stars returned to the sky unbroken and bright. Inside, a family that didn't quite know it was becoming, one leaned in closer, bound not by blood, but by battles shared and hearts reopened. Shadow, still recovering, blinked up at the boy who had never stopped believing in him. His tail tapped the mat once. It was a soft sound, but it echoed like thunder. Spring settled fully over Aspen Creek, like a balm, its soft winds filled with the scent of pine needles and newly thawed earth. The snowmelt gave life to streams that whispered through the hillsides, and flowers bloomed along the wooden fences that lined the Hartman's yard. But perhaps nowhere was rebirth more evident than in the small clinic room, where a once broken German shepherd was slowly rising back to life. Shadow stirred with more strength, now pushing himself up onto his elbows, his eyes clearer and more alert with each passing day. His bandages had been removed, revealing pink lines of healing across his flank. The hair was growing back unevenly, but with promise. There were still moments, quiet shudders, startles at sharp noises, but the haunted panic that had once gripped him was softening, replaced by recognition, trust, and something even rarer, contentment. Lisa Hartman sat beside him every morning and every evening. Her appearance had changed subtly. Her face, once etched with exhaustion, now held color. Her tall frame moved with purpose again. Her laughter returned first in whispers, then in full, quiet bursts. When Shadow did something unexpected, like gently pawing her for another bite of scrambled eggs. Ethan had changed too. He now woke early to walk Shadow with his mother, brushing the dog's coat afterward while humming off-key songs. He had taken to journaling each day, filling pages with stories from Shadow's perspective. "Today I conquered the stairs on my own." The small human cheered. "I think I like him." One afternoon, Sheriff Owen Blake stopped by the house. Dressed in jeans and a short-sleeved button-up shirt, his usual stoic demeanor relaxed under the warmth of the sun. He brought with him a certificate signed by the town council and marked with an official gold seal. "It's official," he said, crouching to scratch behind Shadow's ears. "Shadow's adoption has been finalized." Lisa looked down at the papers, emotions warring in her chest, relief, joy, and a strange tender ache. She had avoided finalizing the adoption for days, unsure whether Shadow would ever be whole enough to live a full life outside the clinic. But he was more than ready. He was thriving. "We're proud to have him," Lisa replied. "He's family now." Ethan grinned wide, throwing his arms around Shadow's neck. The dog leaned into him, pressing his face against the boy's chest. Later that week, Lisa decided it was time to introduce Shadow back to the world on his terms. They took him to Silver Lake, a quiet grassy area just outside town, where the water shimmered like glass and ducks floated by lazily. It was a place Drew had once brought Ethan to fish. The lake brought back memories, yes, but also renewal. A few families were scattered across picnic tables, and among them was Linda Maddox, a retired schoolteacher in her 70s with silver hair, kind eyes, and a gift for calming anxious creatures. She volunteered part-time at the animal shelter and was known in town for baking peanut butter dog treats shaped like stars. "Is that the hero himself?" she said, rising from a bench and waving as Shadow approached. Lisa nodded. "He's still adjusting." Linda knelt slowly and extended a treat in her palm. Shadow hesitated, then took it gently. His tail gave a slow wag. "I always said the heart heals fastest with kindness and cookies." Linda smiled. Ethan played near the lake's edge while Lisa and Linda chatted, and Shadow lay beneath the picnic table with his head resting on Lisa's foot. The moment was simple, but it was enough. Back home that night, Shadow circled his bed, once then jumped up, not onto the mat, but onto the couch beside Ethan. Lisa made a mock protest, but when she looked into the dog's warm, steady eyes, she said nothing more. That same week, Ethan was invited to a classmate's birthday party, his first since his father's death. He hesitated when Lisa brought it up, fear flickering in his gaze. But then he looked at Shadow, who sat nearby, watching with quiet assurance. "I'll go," Ethan said softly. The night of the party, Lisa helped him tie his sneakers and handed him a card to bring. "I'll pick you up at 7, she said. Ethan hesitated at the door, then turned back to Shadow and kissed the top of his head. "I'll be back, promise." Shadow watched him go, then returned to Lisa's side. She reached down her hand, resting on his head. "You're bringing him back to the world," she whispered, "and he's doing the same for you." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Lisa sat on the porch with a blanket and a warm mug of tea. Owen arrived just after twilight, bringing a small lantern and 2 slices of blueberry pie from Millie's diner. "I figured we've earned a night off," he said. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge. Shadow lay at their feet, eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of peace. "You ever think about what comes next?" Owen asked. Lisa looked at him. "Every day." He reached for her hand, just for a moment, and she didn't pull away. Inside the house, Ethan's laughter echoed as he came through the door, cheeks red from running and eyes sparkling. That night, as they all gathered in the living room, mother, son, protector, and friend, the lines between wounds and healing, past and future, blurred into something new. Shadow curled beside the couch, his breath deep and even. For the first time in years, he slept without twitching. No whimpers, no panic, just peace. He had come through the storm, and now surrounded by love that asked for nothing in return, he was home. The sun cast a golden hue over Aspen Creek as it dipped low behind the pine-covered hills, the late spring air sweet with the scent of lilac and cut grass. It was the kind of day the town would remember, not because of anything extraordinary in the sky, but because of what was happening down in Townsend Park, a gathering of neighbors, friends, and strangers, all united to honor a dog who had changed lives far beyond what words could express. Bunting in the shape of paw prints lined the gazebo. Children clutched miniature American flags, and hand-painted signs reading, "Thank you, Shadow," waved gently in the breeze. Beneath a white canopy, a long wooden bench had been set up, where Shadow now sat, calm, composed, and wearing a dark blue service vest, stitched with the words, "Honorary Deputy." He was flanked on either side by Ethan and Lisa, and though he didn't seem to understand the fanfare, his posture was proud, his eyes scanning the crowd with the steadiness of someone who knew he belonged. Sheriff Owen Blake stood behind the podium in full-dress uniform, his posture more formal than usual, but his voice unmistakably warm. "When we think of heroes," he began, "we picture uniforms, medals, and titles. But sometimes heroes wear fur-carry scars and walk on 4 legs. A ripple of soft laughter spread through the crowd. "I've served alongside many brave souls in my life," Owen continued, "but few have matched the courage, loyalty, and heart of the dog we honor today. Shadow didn't just protect this town. He reminded us what it means to heal, to trust, and to love without condition." He turned and approached the bench, a black box in his hand. Inside, it was a custom medal forged by a local craftsman, silver-toned, embossed with the shape of a German shepherd, and inscribed with the words, "Silent Guardian." Owen knelt, clipping it gently to Shadow's vest. "Shadow." He said, his voice catching just slightly, "On behalf of Aspen Creek and all those whose lives you've touched, I present you with the title of Silent Hero." Applause erupted loud and long. Children cheered, and someone in the back began clapping in rhythm. Shadow tilted his head at the noise, but remained still, tail wagging once with quiet grace. Among those clapping was Marla Green, the retired behaviorist who had worked with Shadow during his early recovery. Her silver blonde hair was braided today, and she wore a weathered leather vest over a faded blue sundress. She didn't approach the stage, but stood watching from beneath a sugar maple tree, nodding, once lips pressed into a soft smile. After the ceremony, Lisa, Ethan, and Owen led Shadow down the cobbled park path that curved along a line of blooming cherry trees. The crowd dispersed behind them, giving the little family space to breathe. Lisa had changed into a light denim shirt and beige slacks. Her cheeks flushed from sun and emotion. She looked more herself than she had in years. Her hand brushed lightly against Owen's as they walked, and this time, neither pulled away. Ethan skipped a few steps ahead, holding Shadow's leash loosely. His voice was animated as he told Shadow about all the other dogs he wanted to train one day. Not for police work, he added, glancing back at his mom, but for helping people. Like kids who've lost someone, or who are scared of the world. That sounds like a good plan, Lisa replied. I think I want to call it the Second Chance Project, he added, looking down at Shadow, because every dog and every person deserves one. Behind them, Owen chuckled softly. We might have a future leader in our midst. They passed Millie's diner, where the owner herself, Millie Donovan, a plump woman in her late 60s, with a bun of white hair and a cherry-patterned apron, stood waving from the doorway. First slice of pie's on the house next time, Shadow, she called out, holding up a tin. Shadow barked once, startling a pair of pigeons and earning more laughter from passers-by. They reached the far edge of the park, where the path sloped gently toward the river. A wooden bench overlooked the water. The three sat there, Shadow resting at their feet. The world was still save for the soft rush of the current and birds returning to their nests. I used to be afraid of quiet moments, Lisa admitted. After Drew passed, the silence was unbearable. Now, I think I've started to love them. Owen nodded. Sometimes peace is the bravest thing to choose. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the last orange streaks faded into dusk. Ethan leaned against Lisa's shoulder, and Shadow rested his chin on Ethan's knee. The chapter that had begun with rescue and survival was closing now, not in pain or loss, but in stillness, in hope. This wasn't a perfect family. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was real, and it was theirs. As the stars blinked into view, Shadow gave a long, contented sigh. Lisa looked down at him and whispered, "You're home now." And this time, there was no storm, no fear. Just the quiet of a small town under a wide sky, and a family who had found each other not by blood, but by the healing power of love, loyalty, and a second chance. Sometimes the ones who carry the deepest wounds are the ones who teach us how to heal. Shadow didn't need words to remind us of courage, loyalty, or love. He just needed someone to believe in him again. And maybe that's true for all of us. In a world that moves too fast, may we all remember to slow down, to notice the quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the ones who still hope behind tired eyes. Because sometimes offering a second chance doesn't just save them, it saves us too. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Comment below and tell us, have you ever been rescued by a love you didn't expect, or met a friend who changed your life when you needed it most? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that healing is possible, love is real, and second chances are worth believing in.